Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third and last panel of this first day of the Conversations program here in Doha. We're going to stay with this theme of transformation and becoming with blueprints for the future, Gulf urbanism, heritage and renewal, which gathers an esteemed panel of speakers. Her Excellency Sheikha Hala bin Mohammed Al Khalifa, who is an artist from Manama, Fatma Ebrahim Al-Salwi, the director of Qatar Blueprint, Lowry, Director Emeritus at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, in a panel moderated by my counterpart, Dr. Jelena Trkulja, Senior Advisor for Academic and Cultural Affairs at Qatar Museum. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Across the Gulf today, spatial planning and cultural development are increasingly discussed together. Many of the projects you'll hear about sit within long-term national frameworks such as Qatar National Vision, Saudi Vision, Bahrain Economic Vision, all supposed to be delivered in 2030. Documents that look beyond infrastructure to questions of society, culture, and place. And despite the title, today's conversation isn't only about architecture or urban design. Here, blueprint is used more broadly to describe large-scale cultural and heritage planning. And it's about experiences, how these ideas shape through real projects, cultural programs, and institutional experiments, and how heritage landscapes and communities are activated in the process. We'll begin with a question for Sheikha Hala, who is an accomplished artist and cultural leader with experience in directing public art, heritage, and creative projects both in her native Bahrain and in Qatar. And the first example we want to bring up is the Pearling Path, which was named the best walking tour destination in the Middle East by Condé Nast Traveler. So how was it developed? What makes it so interesting and attractive? And where does it fit within larger Bahrain's vision for developing cultural infrastructure?
Thank you, Dr. Elena. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Dr. Elena started with the question or the topic that's closest to my heart. The Pearling Path is a World Heritage Site. It's inscribed in the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2012. But the special part about the Pearling Path is actually a very personal part. My mother, Sheikha bint Mohammed, actually had a wonderful team when she was the Minister of Culture in Bahrain, and they wove the story of the Pearling Path together. There was nothing called the Pearling Path before, calling it the Pearling Path. What we had in Bahrain, in the heritage city of Muharraq, is the historic building that told the story of everyone that worked in the pearling industry before the discovery of oil. So it was the houses of the merchants, the houses of the singers that were performing on the ships, on the dhows during the pearling trade, the houses of the medical doctors that supported the fishermen and the pearl divers in their journey. So it was woven very organically. And these homes along the path were all preserved to tell the story. But the Pearling Path actually doesn't start in Muharraq itself. It starts from the sea. It starts from the oyster beds. And they're very unique to Bahrain because it's where there are pools of sweet water within the salty water of the sea. And apparently the best quality of pearls come out from these oyster beds. And so the inscribing of the Pearling Path actually starts from the oyster beds into the old heritage city of Muharraq, which tells the story of everyone that worked in the pearling trade.
From your perspective as an artist, because you're a practicing artist, how has this Pearling Path contributed to the regeneration of Muharraq?
It's very important not to romanticize the idea of history. It's very important to live it. So I think what the Pearling Path or the city of Muharraq does is it brings people into a touch of history or a taste of history without romanticizing, because it's living heritage, and you can walk through the pathways and feel the space. There's a certain quote of a very famous Turkish writer. His name is Orhan Pumak, he said something very interesting. I'm sorry I didn't memorize it. I wrote it down to share it with all of you. He said something along the lines of old cities and streets stores emotions. Protecting them protects our collective memory. And I believe this is so beautiful, the way he said, the way that he described that heritage cities, they have emotions and they have feelings. And I feel that as any creative process, we have our emotions that drive us to do a certain creative project or work. And that's what I have to say about the Purling Path.
And what made it so attractive that Condé Nast voted it the most walkable, the best walking tour destination in the Middle East?
I think
what is it?
You know, Dr. Jelena, when the story started, no one understood what the Purling Path was. But little by little, as the houses were renovated, were opened, invited people to come in, programming started to happen, then people realized, okay, that tells the history, that tells the story of the Purling Path. And I feel that that sort of being close to that environment, you know, not only evokes emotion and memory, but it evokes so many channels for the creative process. Today, with festivals like Muharraq Nights, for instance, it's been going on for a few years, and I think on a yearly basis, it attracts younger audiences that come, that celebrate the city in contemporary public pieces that pop along the Purling Path. So I think it's very organic, this flow between living heritage, contemporary art, and people who are working within these themes.
Thank you. Fatima, you're an architect and an urbanist who co-founded Atlas Bookstore, which is a specialized platform for the built and natural environment of the Arab world. And you should definitely visit it since it is here nearby in Musharrab. We can tell you where soon. Fatima is also a founder of the studio Imara, an interdisciplinary design practice. And she's behind most of the large architectural projects directed by Her Excellency's office that you might have heard about if you came to the first talk today. And as if this was not enough, she's also the director of something called Qatar Blueprint. So I would like to ask you, what is the mandate of Qatar Blueprint and the concept and the vision behind it?
Sure, thank you, Jelena. Thank you, Art Basel, for the invitation. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salam alaikum jami'an. I just want to make a note about Art Basel. So everything that I'm doing now with Qatar Museums, be it Qatar Blueprint or any of the other projects, actually started in Art Basel in Basel, just over 15 years ago. And that's where I met His Excellency Sheikh Hassan bin Mohammed bin Ali, as well as Her Excellency Sheikh Al-Mayasa. And that's when I got offered the position to join Qatar Museums. So it's quite surreal, and it's amazing to see that Art Basel is here now in Doha, and how much Doha has to add to Art Basel as well. The first project I started on my first day in Qatar Museums in the Office of Her Excellency, it was really the first meeting I got into before I even saw my desk. And it was to work on a project called Media City at the time, which was really to reorganize and restructure the compound in which the Qatar National Media Corporation sits in, Al Jazeera, Qatar Television, and much more. And the first meeting was with Her Excellency and Rem Koolhaas as well, who happens to be our collaborator and partner with the team at OMA to deliver Qatar Blueprint. And really at the time, no one really understood why a team in Qatar Museums or the Office of Her Excellency was working on Media City, Al Jazeera, and Qatar National Television, right? But I think now it all comes together in Qatar Blueprint. A couple of years ago, the whole country was really focused on delivering the World Cup. Everyone's efforts was towards that, whether they were involved in football, in sports, or whether they're involved in any sector, really. Every single sector in the country helped deliver such a successful tournament and made it so much more than just football, made it about the country itself and what the country has to offer, not only to football and sport, not only to the people of Qatar and the visitors of Qatar, but to the region, if not globally, as it has changed what the tournament itself is about today. Back then, we were asked a question by His Highness the Emir to think about what next for the positioning of Qatar, what next to tell people about Qatar beyond football, beyond energy and LNG, and beyond the role it plays with its large impact in the sort of political sphere today. And we propose that that's really an urban exercise of master planning the country. Not in terms of creating a national master plan per se, as that is the work of our very close partners and collaborators, the Ministry of Municipality, but really we would add a layer of creative thinking, if I can call it that. And so we proposed to create and embed a creative planning think tank in the Office of Her Excellency within Qatar Museums. However, Qatar Museums is one of our stakeholders rather than the owner of this project. And so when I say one of the stakeholders, we currently are working on this project with multiple stakeholders, be they from the public sector, so really all the government entities, the ministries, which we need very much for this project, and we're now learning that they need us very much for the project that they work on, as well as the private sector. And in essence, the project Qatar Blueprint, the initiative itself, is about mapping the existing assets, physical assets of Qatar, as well as the social assets of Qatar. And when I say that, traditionally, the focus has been centralized on Doha, on developing the cultural ecosystem of Doha, as well as the cultural activations of the city. And we're looking at a pan-peninsula sort of approach, where we're saying each one of the 8 municipalities is as important as Doha. There have been, as you can see, with different sort of initiatives of Qatar Museums, as well as other entities, efforts of looking at the other municipalities. However, we think that each municipality is very distinct, with a very unique history, very unique offering that in many cases has been overlooked today because of the mass urbanization of the city of Doha and the sort of urban migration towards Doha. But we're saying there's still a chance to look at all of those municipalities and really work on activating them and decentralizing. And that, in essence, in a short sort of statement, is what Qatar Blueprint is. I'm going to try to share as much as I can about the project today, as we're trying to keep a lot of our outcomes and our findings for, inshallah, an exhibition in around 2 years that will present the work that we've been doing over the duration of the project. But I also want to clarify that Qatar Blueprint within it has we're looking at multiple scales and multiple ways of working on the sort of, the survey and mapping that we're working on, but also the vision planning that we're currently undergoing. We have an educational arm where we're working with entities or initiatives such as the Norman Foster Institute and Foundation in Madrid. We're working on the public realm, which we cannot sort of isolate from this whole conversation. And with that, we have multiple partners, one of which is landscape architect Basmet. As I mentioned, the core mandate of Qatar Blueprint is what we're doing with our partners in the country, very much with a lot of the local knowledge that is needed and that this project cannot be delivered without, but also with our partners, long-term partners, OMA, due to the knowledge that they now have after having worked in the country for almost 20 years. The Aga Khan Trust for Culture, an important partner as well, that brings in a very sensitive approach to the work that we're doing. So really, we're trying to cover different aspects of understanding how we can draw and create this vision plan, the next vision plan for the country. Not a national master plan, but a layer that complements and supports multiple entities, be it in planning, in tourism, in culture, museums, education, and what else? Yeah.
I ask you, although you cannot reveal things, but what did you find most surprising in all of your work thus far in mapping and looking at what's there? Has there been anything particularly surprising or compelling that you would highlight?
Well, what came to our surprise is as much as we thought we knew about Qatar and what exists in terms of physical and social assets, it was only apparent that there was so much that had been overlooked. And this is what we're trying to map, and this is what we're trying to bring to the attention of not only to the team behind the exercise or behind the project itself, but to all the partners and stakeholders that we're currently working with. I'll give a simple example. A very close partner to us is, of course, Qatar Tourism. And with all the work that they've been doing the past couple of years and all the activations, and you can just see it around you today in Musharrab and elsewhere, and as a partner of Art Basel as well, we've been in conversation about many of these hidden discoveries and how our mapping can inform what they are now working on in terms of delivering tourism activations and events and programs, etc. And the same goes with whether it's the health sector, the sports sector, education, etc. So I would really say that we're all not only our partners in this journey of discovery today, but we ourselves are sort of discovering things every day. And I see my colleague Mira here, and together we always have a moment of excitement throughout the day because we found something or we've discovered something. And I think that's really what's going to enrich the outcomes of this exercise, is that before we start proposing any new scenarios or any new plans, we're working with what's existing. And I think that's a lesson that we've learned from developments that have happened in Qatar, but also developments that have happened in the region. If you start lavishly early, that's a classic mistake. So before that, we understand what's existing and we build upon that.
Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you.
Glenn, we turn to you. You've been at the helm of MoMA for 30 years, transformed the museum, made modern and contemporary art attractive to young audiences, and accomplished many other things. In addition to this, I know you hold a PhD in Islamic art from Harvard. And with all this vast experience and background in Islamic art, you bring your expertise now to the Biennale of Islamic art in Riyadh. Could you tell us a little bit about the concept behind the Biennale? There have already been 2 editions, last year and 2023. Tell us a little bit about the Biennale.
Thank you, Jelena, and what a thrill it is to be here at the inaugural edition of Art Basel Qatar, and to be here with Sheikha Hala and Fatma. I mean, there's something incredibly motivating and energizing to be at the beginning, to have that sense of limitless possibilities, and to be a participant in the way in which we create collectively culture. And that is one of the reasons that I am delighted and excited to have made this transition from having been at the Museum of Modern Art, where I focused really on one place at one time and trying to understand the different ways in which we can read modern and contemporary art at a global scale, to working as an advisor to a biennial that is foregrounded in a different place with a different kind of agenda. And so the Islamic Biennial is part of the Diriyah Biennial Foundation's remit, a remit to oversee a biennial of contemporary art in Riyadh and a biennial devoted to Islamic art in Jeddah. And if many of you may have already been to the biennial in Riyadh, it just opened days ago. If you haven't been, I would urge you to go. It's an extraordinary achievement, co-curated by Nora Razian and Sabi Ahmad. It's a thoughtful, powerful look at contemporary art, grounded in South Asia and this region, but located in a global context. The mandate, the remit of the Islamic Biennial is to think about Islamic art within a long tradition over the span of the history of the region, but also to think synthetically about how Islamic art lives today. And so one of the most important aspects of the biennial is its location, not just in Jeddah, the gateway to Mecca and Medina, but in the Hajj terminal, designed in the early 1980s by SOM, but engineered by a brilliant man, Fazlur Khan, who created this beautiful tented structure that stretches over something like 50 hectares. I mean, it is an enormous, vast, magisterial space. And when a vacant part of the Hajj terminal was turned over to the Biennial Foundation, they asked OMA, so there's a beautiful linkage here with what's happening in Qatar, to design a series of pavilions that would be the building blocks for the biennial. And those pavilions sit on the edge of this beautiful tented structure. And what attracted me to working with the team was, how do you think about Islam, and Islamic art in particular, as a synthetic, evolving idea that can embrace multiple positions? And how do you engage works of art that might date from the 12th century or the 15th century or the 17th century with what's happening today? And so there is a rich interplay within the biennial between past and present, different geographies, and this notion that you can have a open attitude towards what might constitute an Islamic art. And I'm reminded of something that Her Excellency said here, I think this morning, but I certainly heard it say it several times, that you can be a conservative society but a tolerant one. And I think that's really important, that one can respect traditions but be open to other people's positions. And I think that's at the center of what the Islamic Biennial tries to do.
What I'm hearing is, from all of your projects, is that heritage holds this central space in building the cultural infrastructure of the three countries. Do you see this as a strategic shift, using culture not just to preserve the past, but to shape the future? What else is here at play? It's quite a unique situation in a way. You know, it's a question for everybody, so whoever feels like answering.
I'll start. I think it's very important because one cannot grow without the other. I feel that it's very important. Preservation of culture, celebrating culture, opening the doors for knowledge, networking, exchange. I mean, today, I personally was overwhelmed by all the emotions I felt as I was walking through the fair, and to see how, you know, to see the interaction between the gallerists, between the artists, and, you know, and Doha has a very big place in my heart because this was my home for a long time, where I worked with, you know, a great deal of experts, and I saw the growth, and I understand how the city was able to reach to what we see today. And it's, you know, Sherab is definitely a beautiful urban place that we're celebrating now, that's hosting all of us. But I feel that it's a circle, it's an ecosystem. One feeds the other, and if one grows without the other, then you're missing something. So I think it's important to pay attention to all of that.
I would just add that it's an ecosystem, but we think of heritage as a kind of abstract concept. It's an embrace of past and culture, but we shouldn't forget that heritage is people, right? That it's actually individuals, and that we spend a lot of time around the remnants, the traces, the memories of a past. But that past is embodied in people, and the capacity to make heritage live requires individuals in the present not only to valorize it, but to act on it. And so here, of course, you can look at the extraordinary work that's being done by Sheikha Al and many others in the case of the Diriyah Biennial Foundation, Ayal Bakri, who's the CEO, and Rakan Al-Tuk, who's a deputy minister, and Prince Badr. They requires people to put their arms around this and say, we will act, we will transform, we will preserve, but we will also bring that heritage not just into the present, but into the future. And so when I think of heritage, I think of the people and their responsibility.
I like the term living heritage because I think it's alive and it has a pulse. And I have to share that one of the beautiful examples I saw of living heritage this morning was a piece by a Qatari artist. She's a wonderful, creative lady. Her name is Buthaina Al-Miftah. And Buthaina created this hanging installation of a fabric that has calligraphy all wrapped up with tassels, and And I mean, you know, it's all monotone, it's white. I mean, she can explain it better than me, obviously, but I was moved by it because she's a contemporary artist. She's talking about heritage. She portrays a traditional Qatari thobe with tassels of the traditional gold jewelry that the women would wear and put in their heads, and its tassels with, you know, decorative motifs. But she created this contemporary, like, suspended piece of art that was breathtaking. So, you know, me as a, you know, as perceiving that or looking at that artwork, I'm amazed how heritage is living, and it has a place in our contemporary setting now.
And if
so
I may come back to your original example of Meshereb, I think it's a wonderful illustration of how heritage is treated.
preserved, yeah.
Although this is new, at the same time, the elements of traditional architecture are preserved to such a degree that you have a sense of authenticity when you step into Meshereb.
Yeah.
And maybe I can add to that. I think it's very, you know, important and impressive what has happened in Meshereb, what has happened in the neighboring Souq Waqif, and then you have the National Museum of Qatar as well. And I think what's even more important is how to link these different enclaves and these different sort of destinations, right? And that's also what we're currently focusing on and working on with our colleagues at the National Museum, but also with the Al Khan Trust for Culture and all the sort of involved stakeholders in the country of how can we now link all of these different accomplishments in terms of, you know, these larger enclaves and projects, and for the sake of not only the experience of the people visiting them, whether they are tourists, enhancing the tourists' experience, enhancing the quality of life of residents, but also really enhancing what exists or what can exist if we do that in such important parts of the city, very central and very sort of rich in history, but also, as we are today in Meshereb, very sort of innovative in what has happened over the past few years.
If we may move to the elephant in the room in this topic, which is adaptive reuse, since it's at the heart of most of these projects, I would like your thoughts on the subject. Why is it working so well in this part of the world? It's much more popular than anywhere else that comes to mind. What role does it play? For those in the audience who are not familiar with the term, can you say a few things? And also, it would be interesting to say culturally and socially, what does adaptive reuse do that, for instance, new construction cannot do?
I'm sorry, I have to start because there's a soft spot as well that with this topic you've just came up with, because I was in 2015 the Fire Station Artists in Residence was a program that opened, and it was initiated by Her Excellency Sheikha Hala, who wished to reuse and repurpose an existing fire building station in the heart of Doha city to host an artist residency. So Her Excellency shared this idea, and today you can see that a building like the fire station, repurposed, reused, creates a different soul in the city, allowing artists and creatives to come in and, you know, be residents and create their work and so on. And I'm so proud because I was part of the team that worked on the fire station delivery, and the inauguration, as I said, was 2015. Today, I believe Wa'il Shawqi is taking it to another level. From an artist in residence, it's now being transformed to a more academic space for emerging and young artists. And, you know, I mean, this is one of the most amazing ideas that I can share about adaptive reuse. And there are different examples in Bahrain, obviously, in the purling path, and we can learn more, but you know, the fire station is very close to my heart, and I feel like I've seen how it shifted.
And it was such an interesting time, right? I think it was around the time when the Private Engineering Office and the Ministry of Municipality decided to develop Al Bada' Park. And so we lost a lot. We did lose a lot of the urban fabric in that area. However, there were these sort of larger buildings that were in themselves government institutions, whether it's the fire station, the Ministry of Interior. And I remember during a walk with the sort of larger team, we found these red spray painted crosses all over those buildings, indicating that they are about to be demolished.
Yeah.
And so that I think was a very important and successful attempt to not only preserve but to repurpose. And it really changed the understanding of repurposing in the country. I think what makes it different in the region, to answer your question, Jelena, is that many of those buildings were built not too long ago. They were built at a time where we can remember them being built, our parents can remember them being built, and the planners who worked on them are with us today. And I must point out and thank Ustad Hisham Qaddoumi for being here, as he championed he championed the efforts of these buildings that we're repurposing today. At the time, and I think I show a few of the master plans that he worked on with William Pereira and Llewellyn Davis in the slides. And, I think in Qatar Blueprint, we're continuing that effort. These were all visions that were put not only for the city of Doha, but for the country as well. And we're continuing those efforts, not only by, working on a project such as Qatar Blueprint today, but by preserving the legacy of what they built and what they accomplished. And so within Qatar Museums, it really became a tradition, right? This repurposing sort of exercise, whether it's with the fire station, with Liwan as well, with Methaf, that was a former school, and soon we'll see the art mill and much more. And I have some slides of a project that is not a Qatar Museums project, but it's part of the mandate of Qatar Blueprint to look at how we can help other government institutions repurpose existing structures. And I show the winning proposal of the new headquarters of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which was won by Mexican architect Frida Escobedo, a beautiful scheme that she has sort of created for not only the country and the ministry, but also for the Doha Corniche, where, as you can see in the image, is it the same one? Yes. As you can see in the image, a painting of the post office, which also, the post office, the general post office operations are soon to move out of the building. And it was another building that they actually tested demolishing a small part of the structure. And thankfully, at the time, an Indian, Mumbai-based contractor built such a sturdy structure that it's so difficult to demolish it today. And so what we proposed is that the general post office operations would move out. The land just adjacent to the post office is owned by the ministry, and that's where they want their headquarters. And so we proposed that the ministry takes over the post office and that the post office becomes part of the overall ministry scheme, and it becomes the public face of the ministry. Therefore, that is where, together with Frida, we've designed a program that will welcome the public, unusual for a ministry building, which is usually very secure, let alone it being the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It will welcome the public into a building that not only has a lot of historic value to the people of Qatar, but also, in the architecture world is a very important modernist building. But it will have a library, it will have lecture halls and conference halls. It will have the media department of the ministry that will allow people to attend, these very interesting press conferences that have been taking place lately. And so we were able to bring together two very interesting architectural landmarks, hopefully with Frida's as well, under one sort of operating body, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And our role doesn't stop there. We then got asked to zoom out and look at the overall district, which includes tennis and the court complex and, the tennis complex and Qatar Sports Club and so much more, which I think is very interesting to make sure.
You're constantly zooming out.
It's a constant sort of shift between zooming out and zooming in, which I think is very, very important for planning to happen in such a sort of flexible way.
Thanks.
I think what's interesting about what's happening here and the way in which adaptive reuse is deployed is it also reflects different ideas of modernity. Right? The European idea that the future could only be built by eradicating the past. You can think back to the 19th century and Paris with Haussmann bulldozing through the city in order to create new arteries and creating massive destruction. Also, tremendous potential. Or the ways in which New York was built by just bulldozing down one building after another in order to build new dramatic buildings. And you can look at almost any North American or European city in the first part of the 20th century, and that energy and belief that a future could be built was grounded on a sense that it could only be built by taking the past away, by, in a way, eradicating and bulldozing it. I think we know today that that's not the only way you can build a future, that actually the future is a continuous conversation with the present and the past, and that resources, which might have seemed limitless in 1920 or even 1960 or 1980, are not limitless. And that often the best solutions architecturally are ones that wrestle with what's already given. And I think that's what we're seeing, that there are moments when, of course, you have to build from scratch. But cities are much more interesting.
And they have a soul.
When you see the texture, the filaments, the threads that bind that past into the present. And right here is a perfect example of how effortless that can be. You can make the past live in the present without having to disappear it. But I think it has to do with how you imagine the future.
Right. And I think the operating word here is respect. Because, for instance, the General Post Office, not just that it will be preserved, but it's also mentioned, highlighted in Shehzad Zavud's playground, modernist playground, which I don't know how many people in the audience know about this playground. It's in Al Bidda Park. But it basically commemorates some of the most interesting works of modernist architecture in Qatar in the form of play toys for children, or I don't know how these things are called. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. And that is something also that is very interesting in this moment for this region, because generally looking at the world, it seems that the global mood it feels like it's inward looking. It's marked by right-wing nationalism, political polarization, and suspicion across borders. And the cultural projects emerging across the Gulf stand out precisely because of their openness. They show a completely different mood than this parochial nationalism that we're seeing elsewhere. So many of them are not only preserving heritage, but actively building new international networks, inviting collaboration, exchange, and shared authorship across regions. Now, is this openness a deliberate cultural and political position? Are there some other reasons also behind it?
I need to think about it.
Who wants to talk about politics?
So I'll jump in just to give you time to think. I think what's really interesting in the moment is the way in which regions are creating their own networks. And those are networks based on geographic proximity, political ideology, social relationships. But what's happening here is a network is being created that recognizes how much energy is taking place across South Asia, across the Gulf, and in other geographies. And that is the way artists work. Artists don't live in shells. They speak to each other across time and space through their work, through their friendships, through their relationships. And so whether one wants to structurally create these relationships or not, the creators are making them themselves. And I think there's a recognition that you get much more energy and better results when you allow these networks of relationships to flourish. And I think Doha is a perfect example of that, where you can go from Mataf to the Museum of Islamic Art to shortly the Art Mill, and you can see artists, Rachel Whiteread talking to Ail Shawki, I mean, completely different practices from very different parts of the world that can find common ground here. And I think that's a node in a network that's being shaped all the time in this region.
So these relationships that are being built are meaningful, they're not just symbolic, right?
Not at all symbolic. Not at all symbolic. If I may add as well that, I have seen the years of culture that were initiated by Her Excellency Sheikha Hala and Qatar Museums. And every year brings a different story and puts a highlight on a certain city and puts a highlight on a certain culture. And then you see things spark and you see people get excited and people meet each other and understand each other more. So, as an artist, as someone who's working within the fields of culture, what better ways? This is the soft power. This is how we can all connect without the boundaries of, other theories or other borders. It's a different way of connecting, and it's very harmonious in my opinion.
Indeed. How do you see it playing in Qatar Blueprint?
No, I don't want to tie it into Qatar Blueprint per se, but I do want to say, if there was one wish of a project to work on in Qatar Museums is a way to document all the conversations that have taken place between us at Qatar Museums and all the partners and collaborators and consultants and thinkers and advisors, but not only on the scale of Qatar Blueprint, but also across the country, right? I think it's really a place, Qatar is known as a place that promotes dialogue, but I think it's very true to the very definition of dialogue across the different sectors, and not only when it comes to foreign policy, not only when it comes to culture, but many different sectors and aspects. And I think there's the challenge of how do we then translate that when it comes to the built environment as well. And Hala, you brought up the Years of Culture. I think that's an excellent example. The Years of Culture started as a program for events and activations and things happening. For example, the first one, things happening in Japan, but also things happening in Qatar. And then I think over the past few years, we started seeing how the legacy of the Years of Culture has started to have a physical footprint in the country and in the sort of partnering country. The example I gave of Frida's winning proposal was very timely because just after the announcement was made was the start of the Qatar, Mexico and Canada Year of Culture, and our partner Rosario Nadal here has curated it with us in an exceptional sort of way in terms of activations both in Qatar but also in Mexico. And I think that in itself brings together conversations and brings together the thinking and the plan, the sort of planning for the events and activations, but most importantly, make sure that it has a legacy through a physical footprint, whether it's through architecture, through public art.
And if I may add as well, Fatma, that with the idea of Years of Culture and these cultural collaborations, there's a beautiful project that's being launched, or it's in the making now, between Qatar and Tangiers in Morocco. And it's the idea of Her Excellency to create a cultural hub where this very beautiful creative hub will be developed in the heart of Tangiers, looking after creative industries as a whole and building this cultural bridge between the two nations. So last year it was the celebration of the Qatar-Morocco, but there's a beautiful team put in place working on creating that vision and creating that link even after the end of the cultural year. And that's, but again, I just want to mention the name of that project. It's called Dar Al-Alia. Please stay tuned to learn more about it. I wish I had more images, more teasers, but that's for next time. But it's in the heart of Tangier, the beautiful city in Morocco, and it has a focus on creating a hub for the emerging filmmakers.
Well, I hope next time we meet, we will hear more about it.
Definitely.
Some outcomes as well. We started talking about physical infrastructure, and we moved into this human, cross-cultural building of networks and relations. And since we're running out of time, I would like to thank our speakers for today and all of you for coming.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Her Excellency Sheikha Hala, Fatma. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Jelena. Thank you for embodying this spirit of dialogue, which is so much part of Qatar's DNA and also part of what we do both at Art Basel and at Qatar Creates Talk. So thank you, all of you, for finishing together this incredible first day of the Conversations program. Come back tomorrow at 1:30, where we'll be looking at the question of how do we build an art market with 3 exceptional gallery founders from Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and London. And we'll see all the little links that can be created when we put our energies together in dialogue. Thanks again, and see you tomorrow.